Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a really fascinating analysis of a speech given at Davos. Now, some commentators are arguing that this speech marked a huge, fundamental shift in global politics. We're going to dive into their take on it, what they think it all means, the strategy they see behind it, and, well, the consequences they think are coming.
Okay, so the analysis we're looking at kicks things off with a massive claim. They're not just saying it was a good speech. No, they're putting it on the same level as Ronald Reagan's iconic tear down this wall moment in Berlin. And that comparison, it's really the key to understanding their entire argument.
So, to really get why these commentators see the speech as such a game changer, we have to start with the context. Their whole analysis is built on this one core idea that the global system we've all been living with is, for all intents and purposes, broken. And they argue that's something pretty much everyone agrees on. And here's where it gets interesting. The commentary points out this central tension. While all the big players might agree that the old order, the one set up after World War II, is finished, the real fight is about what's going to replace it. This slide really lays out the two competing visions they're talking about. On one side, you've got people like Mark Carney pushing for a future of more global cooperation, run by international groups. And on the other side, well, the speech outlines a totally different path, a sharp turn away from all that, focusing back on national strength and national interest. So, the argument here is that the old system, one the U.S. actually created, eventually started to backfire on American interests. The commentators claim that for decades, allies got the benefit of a U.S. security shield without paying their fair share. And it's that specific point they believe Trump is now challenging head on. Okay, so if that's the problem they're pointing out, what's the solution? Well, that brings us to what these commentators call a kind of tough love approach presented in the speech. The idea here isn't just asking for things to change. It's about demanding it. And here's the crucial part. This isn't just talk. The way these commentators see it, this is a clear strategy. It's about using the power America already has to force action from allies who, in their view, haven't been pulling their weight for a long, long time. So how does this tough love actually work in practice? Well, the analysis gives us a case study involving a negotiation with Denmark. They use it to show the difference between what countries say when they're under pressure and what they actually do when that pressure is gone. According to the source, here's what happened. During Trump's first term, Denmark made a pledge of $224 million. This is for its own defense, things like airspace surveillance and security measures up in the Arctic. A significant commitment. But here's the twist in their story. After the administration changed, what happened to that $224 million pledge? Well, according to this analysis, Denmark only ended up allocating just 1% of that promised money to its defense budget. And this is where they really tie it all together. They use this whole sequence of events as their exhibit A for this tough love theory. The argument is simple. Without direct, constant pressure, these commitments, they just don't get prioritized. So this all builds to what the commentators see as the real peak of the speech. They argue the message stopped being about negotiation and turned into a very clear, very stark ultimatum that put the entire world on notice. And they point to some, well, incredibly blunt language as proof. Take this comment, which they say was directed right at the Canadian Prime Minister. They present this as a total break from the usual polite diplomatic talk. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it's a direct assertion of influence. So is this just a threat? Well, the analysis makes a really interesting distinction here. They argue we shouldn't see these kinds of statements as just threats, but as something more concrete, more like a promise. They actually break it down into a kind of three-step playbook that they believe explains the whole logic. You start with a reasonable offer. If that doesn't work, you escalate the pressure. And finally, you don't make a threat, you make a promise of exactly what the consequences will be. And this, they argue, was the bottom line, the stark choice presented to the world. It's a simple yes or no, but with huge long-term consequences. This is the ultimate expression of that tough love idea. Sure, you can cooperate, or not, but there will be consequences, and they won't be forgotten.
So, after all that, where does this analysis leave us? Well, the conclusion these commentators come to is that this wasn't just another speech with some tough talk. No, they see it as a declaration, the official announcement of a new era in how the world works.
The main takeaway, from their point of view, is that a new set of rules has been put in place. The message, as they read it,
is crystal clear. The days of relying on American muscle and money without holding up your end of the bargain are over. And it doesn't matter if other world leaders are ready for that or not. And to back this up, they point to the atmosphere in the room itself. They note there were no laughs from the audience of world leaders, just intense focus. They argue everyone in that room understood the weight of the words and knew that, as the saying goes, America was carrying a very, very large stick.
And that all leads to the big, final question this analysis leaves us with. If the rules of the game really have changed, if countries are now being forced to make a clear choice, what does that new world actually look like? What happens next? That's the thought they leave us to ponder.